The door to my house swung open, and there she was. A woman half my age wearing my silk robe, the one I'd bought in Florence on my anniversary. She had the audacity to smirk at me like I was nothing. "Oh, you must be Vivienne," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Conrad said you'd be coming by for your things. We've already put a few boxes in the hallway for you. Just some old jewelry and baby photos. He said your children wouldn't want them cluttering up their own homes." The casual cruelty of it, dismissing my children's heritage as clutter, made my blood sing with rage. Behind her appeared my husband Conrad, holding a glass of scotch like he owned the place. But when his eyes moved from my face to my tailored navy suit, then to the car waiting at the gate, his expression changed. He went ghostly pale. He realized I wasn't the drugged, confused woman he'd abandoned at that nursing home. That's when he saw I wasn't alone. Arthur Bennett stepped out from behind the hedge, followed by my attorney Mr. Henderson and two uniformed police officers. The smirk vanished from her face instantly. But let me tell you exactly how I got here, because what Conrad did to me was unforgivable. And what happened next changed everything. 3 weeks earlier, I was sitting on that cold, crinkly exam table in the doctor's office, swinging my legs slightly while my husband Conrad stood near the door, his hands deep in his pockets. He was doing all the talking. Every time I tried to explain that I simply forgot where I misplaced my reading glasses, he would cut me off with a sad, practiced sigh. He looked at the doctor with eyes full of fake pity, whispering words like confusion and paranoia, as if I weren't even in the room. It felt like watching a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Conrad kept describing moments that never happened, telling the doctor I had wandered into the street at night or forgotten how to use the stove. I felt a chill run down my spine because his voice was so calm, so convincing. He wasn't yelling, he was acting like a worried, grieving partner. The same gentle voice he used to comfort our children, Sarah and Michael, when they were small. I looked at the doctor, hoping to see a spark of doubt, but the man just nodded and scribbled on his clipboard. Something about the way Conrad leaned against the wall felt rehearsed, like he had practiced this speech for weeks. I wasn't powerless yet, but I realized my husband was painting a picture of a woman I didn't recognize. After the doctor left, Conrad approached me with a stack of papers and a heavy silver pen. "It's just for the insurance, Vivienne," he whispered, his voice smooth and cold as silk. "Just a formality for medical bills and a simple cognitive review." I was tired, my head spinning from his lies. I wanted to go home to my garden, maybe call Sarah in Chicago and Michael in Portland about this strange visit. I trusted him. We'd been married 40 years and raised 2 children together. I thought his weird behavior was stress. Conrad stood over my shoulder, watching my hand move across the page, breathing too fast, eyes locked on the pen tip. I signed Vivienne Hale in the neat script my father had taught me. As soon as the ink dried, he snatched the papers and marched toward the door without helping me down. I didn't know it then, but I had just signed away my freedom, my home, and my identity to a man already planning my disappearance. "Let's go home, Conrad," I said as we walked to the car. I was exhausted and just wanted to see my roses. But he drove in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel. As we reached the outskirts of town, he didn't turn toward our neighborhood. Instead, he pulled into a long driveway lined with manicured trees. At the end stood a massive gray building that looked more like a hotel. A sign read Silver Oaks Luxury Assisted Living. My heart began drumming against my ribs. "Why are we here?" I asked, voice trembling. "It's just for observation, Vivienne. A few days so doctors can see you in a controlled environment." Before I could protest, he popped the trunk. There was my favorite blue suitcase, already packed and waiting. He had planned this long before the doctor's office. 2 orderlies in white scrubs appeared before I could unbuckle my seatbelt. They were smiling, but their eyes were firm. I looked at Conrad, pleading, thinking of Sarah and Michael and how worried they'd be when I didn't answer their Sunday calls. But he just stared at the dashboard, waiting for them to take me away. The room was beautiful, but felt like a cage. Pale beige walls, windows that barely opened, no lock on the inside. I was being watched, not protected. I reached for my phone to call my sister, but it was gone. At the nursing station, I asked the woman behind the desk about my phone. She gave me a sympathetic smile. Your husband said it was misplaced during the move. He didn't want you to worry. He's already contacted your family. I asked for my credit cards to call a cab. She shook her head. Mr. Hale secured your valuables for safekeeping. The realization hit like a physical blow. No money, no communication, no way to leave. Conrad had trapped me and already spun his lies to Sarah and Michael. I wasn't a guest. I was a prisoner in a system he'd manipulated, stripped of every tool to fight back before I knew I was in a fight. That first night was the hardest. The facility was quiet, but not peaceful. The sound of 100 people tucked away and forgotten. I sat by my door, lights dimmed, listening to rubber soles squeaking on linoleum. A group of nurses stopped past my doorway, thinking I was asleep. I heard them whispering about the new arrival in room 402. Poor woman, her husband was so thorough with the paperwork. She's listed for long-term residency. Her children called earlier, very understanding about their mother's condition. Such a supportive family. My breath caught. Long-term meant forever. Conrad had poisoned my children against me, convincing them I was truly ill. They talked about how he'd paid 6 months up front and requested my paranoia be managed with sedatives if I became difficult. I didn't cry. I forced myself to stay still. If I acted out, I'd prove Conrad right and confirm whatever lies he'd told Sarah and Michael. I grabbed a notepad and began writing everything down. Conrad thought he'd sent a confused old woman to her final resting place, but he'd actually sent a witness. A week passed in forced activities and bland meals. I took my pills, then hid them under my tongue and spat them out later. I needed my mind sharp. One afternoon, I sat with Martha, an elderly woman who had a hidden smartphone. "You're Vivienne, right?" she whispered, sliding the phone toward me. "Your husband is quite the social butterfly." My heart hammered as I looked at the screen. A social media post from the night before. Conrad in our dining room, holding expensive wine, hosting a dinner party. In my house, the table set with my grandmother's china. But what made my blood run cold was the woman next to him. 30s, long blonde hair, smirking like she owned the place, his arm wrapped around her waist. The caption read, "A new chapter begins, celebrating life's transitions." He hadn't just put me away, he'd replaced me before my side of the bed was cold. I wondered if Sarah and Michael knew about her, or if Conrad was keeping her secret while telling them I was resting comfortably. I asked Martha to zoom in. My eyes weren't what they used to be, but I knew every inch of that house. As the image enlarged, I looked at the wall behind the dining table. My heart skipped. For 40 years, a massive oil portrait of Conrad and me on our wedding day had hung above the fireplace, the centerpiece of the room, symbol of everything we'd built. In the photo, it was gone. In its place hung cold modern art, splashes of gray and black, like a void. On the mantelpiece, our family photos were missing too. Sarah's college graduation, Michael's wedding, our grandchildren's baby pictures. He was erasing our entire family's existence from the walls. He didn't just want me out. He wanted to pretend we'd never lived there at all. I felt coldness settle in my chest, but it wasn't fear. It was hard, sharp anger that made everything perfectly clear. Conrad thought I was a flickering candle he could blow out. But he was wrong. I was the one who'd inherited that house from my father. I was the mother who'd raised his children and built his legacy. Something clicked into place. I wasn't going to die in this beige room. A few days later, Martha showed me another post from our gossipy neighbor. A candid photo of our front garden. I saw my rose bushes. 20 years of careful tending. The same woman from the dinner party stood in the middle wearing gardening gloves, pulling up my prize-winning lilies and tossing them like weeds into a trash bag. She was replanting with generic red roses. But what made my hands shake with rage was seeing her rip out the small memorial garden I'd planted for our first grandchild, the one Sarah had lost in her second trimester. Those tiny white roses and baby's breath had been sacred to our family. The caption, "New beginnings in the neighborhood. Out with the old, in with the new." I felt physical pain in my chest. Those lilies were a gift from my father before he passed. The memorial garden represented our family's deepest love and loss. Seeing her stand there barefoot in my soil, laughing while destroying our memories, was the final straw. Conrad hadn't just moved her in, he'd given her my life and my children's heritage to destroy while I was locked away, unable to speak. I had to see my records. If I was going to fight, I needed to know what lies were keeping me here. I waited until the night nurse was distracted with her phone, then walked calmly to the administrative office, pretending to look for water. I found the filing cabinet and slipped out my folder. My hands shook flipping through pages. I expected test results, brain scans, dementia diagnosis, but there was nothing. No confirmed diagnosis, no medical proof of cognitive decline. Just pages of observations, based on concerns from spouse. Conrad had simply told them I was crazy, and because he paid the bills, they believed him. I wasn't being treated for a disease, I was being managed because I was inconvenient. I saw a note, patient shows agitation when discussing home life. Spouse recommends restricted contact to reduce stress. Another note made my blood boil. Per spouse request, children advised mother experiencing severe paranoid episodes. Phone calls may worsen condition. Family visits discouraged. He'd blocked my ability to call for help by labeling my distress as symptoms and turning my own children into unknowing accomplices. I tucked a copy into my robe. I'd been removed not because I was sick, but because I was in the way. I needed an ally who knew how the world worked. That's when I remembered Arthur Bennett. I'd seen him in the halls, a tall, thin man with a sharp gaze that didn't belong here. Then it clicked. Arthur Bennett. My father had mentioned him years ago. They'd worked together on complex estate cases, back when Dad was still practicing law. Arthur had been one of the most respected probate judges in the state before retiring. I'd heard through family friends that he'd had hip surgery recently. Finding him here wasn't coincidence. His daughter had mentioned at Dad's funeral that Silver Oaks was where he'd recover because of their excellent physical therapy program. I approached him one afternoon in the library while he read a law journal. Judge Bennett, you might remember my father. Charles Whitmore. You worked together on the Morrison estate case? His eyes sharpened with recognition. Charlie Whitmore's daughter, Vivienne. I didn't waste time. I told him exactly how I got there. Showed him the photo of the mistress in my garden and the medical file with no diagnosis. I told him about my children in Chicago and Portland, how Conrad was using them as unwitting guards. Arthur listened without interrupting, fingers tapping rhythmically. He didn't look at me with pity. He looked like I was a puzzle to solve. After I finished, he sat silent for a long moment. Finally, he leaned forward, voice a low growl. Vivienne, there's only one question that matters. Who actually owns that house? And what does your will say about your children's inheritance? I closed my eyes, thinking back 30 years. My father had been a cautious attorney who didn't trust anyone, especially not the man I'd chosen to marry. When he passed, he left me the family estate, but he didn't just hand it over. He insisted the property be placed into a very specific marital trust. Conrad had complained it was an insult to our marriage, but he signed because he wanted the prestige of living in such a grand home. I told Arthur about the trust. It has clauses, I whispered, memory coming back. My father said it was to protect the lineage of the Whitmore family. The children are named as secondary beneficiaries. Conrad never cared about fine print. He saw the house as an asset to use. He had no idea Sarah and Michael had legal standing in this trust. Arthur's eyes lit up. A marital trust with protection clauses and children as beneficiaries. If your father wrote it, and knowing Charlie, he did this right. He likely included safeguards against exactly what's happening. And if Conrad's manipulating your children while stealing their inheritance. His voice trailed off, but his smile was sharp as a blade. For all his planning, Conrad had a massive blind spot. He thought the house was his because he lived there and paid taxes, but the legal foundation was built on my family's terms. My children, whom he was using as pawns, were actually the key to his downfall. I need a copy of that trust, I told Arthur the next morning. You have a personal attorney? Someone not on Conrad's payroll? I did. Old Mr. Henderson had been our family lawyer for decades, working closely with my father. He'd handled Sarah and Michael's college trust funds and knew our family well. Conrad had tried to get me to switch to his modern firm, but I'd refused out of habit. Now that habit was my lifeline. Arthur helped me use a secure line in the facility's business center, one not monitored by the front desk. When Henderson picked up, I told him I was calling from Silver Oaks and needed the original trust documents immediately. He sounded shocked. "Conrad told me you were traveling for your health. He said Sarah and Michael were taking turns checking on the house." My heart hammered. "I'm not traveling. I'm trapped. Do not call Conrad. My children don't know the truth. Send the documents to Judge Arthur Bennett at this address." 2 days later, a thick manila envelope arrived. Arthur and I retreated to a corner of the library, hidden behind encyclopedias. Conrad never revoked Henderson as my attorney, too arrogant to think I'd reach out. He thought I was already a ghost and my children were under his spell. Arthur put on his reading glasses and scanned the dense legal jargon. I watched his face for any sign of hope. Suddenly, he stopped and jabbed his finger at a paragraph near page 15's bottom. "Here it is," he whispered, voice trembling with excitement. The clause was brilliant and cruel. If one spouse attempted to deem the other mentally incompetent without a secondary, independent court-appointed evaluation, control of all trust property would automatically revert to the accused party pending full judicial review. But there was more. Arthur continued, pointing to another section. If such manipulation was attempted while secondary beneficiaries, my children, were kept uninformed, the manipulating party would forfeit all marital rights to the property entirely. My father had built a trapdoor into the very document Conrad thought gave him power. By signing those papers and putting me here, based only on his concerns, while lying to Sarah and Michael, Conrad had triggered a legal self-destruct sequence. He'd literally handed me the keys the moment he tried to take them away. Arthur smiled. "Vivian, your husband didn't just make a mistake. He handed you a loaded gun. Now we just have to help you pull the trigger." While we planned our countermove, Conrad was busy being greedy. Arthur had banking contacts who did quiet digging. Conrad wasn't just living in the house with his mistress, he was trying to strip its value. He'd applied for a massive home equity line of credit and was transferring large sums from our joint accounts to a private offshore account. He wanted to bleed me dry before I could get out. Worse, he was doing it while telling Sarah and Michael the money went toward my special care at Silver Oaks. But because of Arthur's discovered trust clause, the bank had flagged transactions as irregular. They hadn't stopped him yet, but were asking questions he couldn't answer. He was getting desperate, needing money to keep his mistress in expected lifestyle. Every day I stayed was another day he could forge signatures or trick bank tellers. I realized I didn't have months to wait for court dates. I had to move now, before nothing was left to save, and before my children were left holding guilt for enabling his theft. The man who'd promised to love and honor me was selling my heritage to the highest bidder, using our children's love as a shield. I needed more than a lawyer. I needed someone to dig up Conrad's hidden dirt. Arthur introduced me to Delilah Cross, a tiny woman in her 80s in the East Wing. She'd been a top investigative reporter and still had a steel-trap mind. She had a smuggled laptop for researching her memoirs. When I told her my story, she didn't offer sympathy, she offered skills. "Let's see what Mr. Hale has been up to while you've been confused," she said with a wicked grin. Within 48 hours, Delilah found things I never could have imagined. She tracked Conrad's credit trail and found a lease for a luxury apartment across town. He hadn't just started this affair. He'd been paying for this woman's second home over 8 months before taking me to that doctor. Most damning was what she found in his email account. Conrad had been corresponding with Sarah and Michael, painting increasingly dark pictures of my mental deterioration. He'd sent carefully crafted messages describing incidents that never happened, complete with fake photos of concerning behavior. He was systematically poisoning my children while planning to steal their inheritance. This wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a calculated plan to remove me so he could play a new game with my money and children's legacy. The evidence was mounting, but I still had one major hurdle. I was legally unfit. To break Conrad's spell, I needed to prove my mind was sharp. Arthur used his influence to bring in an independent physician, a woman not on the facility's payroll who didn't know Conrad. We met in the garden, away from prying staff eyes. For 3 hours, she put me through rigorous cognitive testing. I solved complex math problems, recited long text passages, explained marital trust intricacies. I didn't miss a beat. When finished, the doctor looked at me with awe and anger. Mrs. Hale, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your cognitive function. You scored in the top percentile for your age group. What's been done to you is unconscionable. She immediately filed a formal objection to Conrad's previous claim, stating the initial evaluation was fraudulent and based on biased testimony. She also noted my isolation from children appeared to be deliberate manipulation rather than medical necessity. The wall Conrad built was crumbling. I was no longer a patient. I was a woman kidnapped by paperwork, about to walk out the front door to reclaim my life and children's trust. With the doctor's report and trust documents, Arthur didn't file a simple complaint. He helped me file an emergency injunction. We didn't want a long trial. We wanted immediate action. We petitioned the court to freeze Conrad's account access and order immediate property status review based on the trust's accused party clause. But we also did something that would shake Conrad to his core. We formally notified Sarah and Michael of legal proceedings and their rights as trust beneficiaries. When the process server arrived at my house to hand Conrad papers, he was having lunch on the patio with his mistress. According to Delilah's contacts report, Conrad didn't look worried with the first set of papers. He actually laughed at the injunction, thought it was minor nuisance, a last gasp effort from a woman rotting in a nursing home. But when the server handed him notification copies for Sarah and Michael, Conrad's face went white. He had no idea those papers were a legal time bomb. He thought he'd won the war, so didn't realize he'd just lost his fortress. He was still laughing at my injunction, but the clock was counting down to when my children would learn the truth. The next day, I made my move. I didn't sneak out like a fugitive. I called Conrad from the facility's main phone. When he answered, he sounded panicked. "Vivienne? I told the nurses you shouldn't be calling. It's bad for your health. I've explained everything to Sarah and Michael. They understand you're not well." I could hear desperation creeping in. He was trying to shore up defenses, but it was too late. I kept my voice soft and shaky, playing the expected role. "I know, Conrad. I'm sorry. I just want to retrieve some personal items, my mother's jewelry and old photos of the children. Please, I promise I won't stay long." I could hear him calculating. He figured if he let me take a few trinkets, I'd be satisfied and go back quietly. It would make him look charitable if anyone asked, especially if Sarah or Michael called. "Fine," he sighed. "Come tomorrow at 2, I'll have the staff bring you." He was so confident I had no power left that he told me he'd have his assistant, the Mistress, there to help pack. He wanted me to see her, twist the knife one last time to ensure I knew I was replaced and my children would never hear different. He thought he was inviting a broken woman to her funeral. He didn't realize he was inviting the house's owner to her homecoming, and his carefully constructed web of lies to my children was about to unravel. The morning of my visit, I woke early. I didn't put on the drab, oversized facility clothes. Instead, I reached into my closet's back for the one outfit I'd kept hidden. A tailored navy blue suit I'd bought in Paris years ago, the outfit of a woman who ran board meetings, not one who sat in community rooms. I did my hair and applied lipstick with a steady hand. I didn't look like a patient. I looked like the woman who'd built our family fortune from the ground up. The mother who'd raised 2 successful children and managed a family legacy. Arthur met me in the lobby, dressed in his best judge's robes, looking like absolute authority. "Are you ready, Vivienne?" I took a deep breath. My heart was steady. I wasn't filled with anger anymore. I was filled with cold, hard purpose. I wasn't going back to that house to beg or cry. I was going back to take what was mine and clear my name with my children. As we walked toward the waiting car, I didn't look back at the gray building once. I was leaving the unfit version of myself in that beige room. The woman driving toward the family estate was in complete control, bringing truth with her. The car pulled up to my home's gates. I asked the driver to wait at the entrance. I wanted to walk up that long gravel driveway myself. As my heels clicked on stones, memories flooded back. The spot where Sarah and Michael learned to ride bikes, where Conrad had run alongside them with patient hands back when he was the man I married. not the stranger who tried to steal their mother and inheritance. I saw the old oak tree where we'd celebrated our 25th anniversary, where the children surprised us with a homemade banner. For a moment, the betrayal's weight threatened to crush me. 40 years building this life, only to have the man I loved try to sell it out from under me and poison our children against me. But then I looked at the garden. Empty patches where my father's lilies used to be, where the memorial garden for our lost grandchild had been destroyed. Generic red roses the mistress planted in their place. Sadness vanished, replaced by white-hot iron. I didn't cry. I smoothed my suit jacket and stood tall. I wasn't a victim returning to a crime scene. I was the rightful owner returning to a desecrated property, a mother reclaiming her children's heritage. I reached the front door and didn't knock. I didn't have keys but didn't need them. I just waited. I knew exactly what was about to happen. And that brings us back to where we started. The door swinging open, the mistress in my robe, Conrad's face going pale. But what happened next was even more satisfying. I didn't say a word. I stepped aside and let the professionals work. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, opened his leather folder. His voice was loud and clear, echoing off the high foyer ceilings. Conrad Hale, you are being served with an emergency judicial injunction. He read with slow, deliberate rhythm. The court found the medical evaluation used to commit me was fraudulent. Therefore, under the Whitmore Marital Trust terms, all property control had reverted to me, Vivian Hale, effective immediately. Conrad was ordered to vacate within 1 hour, pending full criminal investigation into elder coercion and financial fraud. But Henderson wasn't finished. Additionally, you're being served with trust violation notices on behalf of secondary beneficiaries, Sarah Hale Morrison and Michael Hale, who've been formally notified of their rights and your attempted theft of their inheritance. The mistress's jaw dropped. She looked at Conrad, expecting him to do something, but he was frozen, a man watching his world dissolve into smoke. This is a mistake, he managed to whisper, voice cracking. My children understand. They know their mother is sick. Henderson cut him off. Your children have been provided copies of all medical records, email communications, and financial transactions. They are currently en route from Chicago and Portland. The police officers stepped into the house, hands on belts. One looked at the mistress. Ma'am, I suggest you put on clothes that don't belong to Mrs. Hale. You have 30 minutes to pack a single bag. But then Mrs. Patterson from next door came running over with her phone out, recording everything. Oh my God, Vivienne. We thought you were. Conrad said you were. Behind her came the Johnsons, the Millers, and half the street. Word had spread fast in our tight-knit neighborhood. The mistress was the first to break. She realized the stability and wealth she'd chased were gone, and now angry adult children were heading this way with questions. She didn't stay to fight for Conrad. She stayed to grab her expensive shoes. She tossed my Florence robe on the floor and scurried upstairs to pack. But then she tried to take my jewelry box. The police officer said, Ma'am, that stays here. She actually argued. But Conrad said I could have. Conrad has no legal right to give you anything. Put it down. The neighbors watched this 20-something woman get schooled by police while trying to steal from an elderly woman. She was out in 20 minutes, not even looking back at Conrad as she hailed a cab with neighbors filming her walk of shame. Conrad tried to play victim. He followed me into the living room, hands shaking. Vivian, please, I was trying to do what was best for you. You were stressed, I thought you needed rest. The children, I was protecting them from seeing you like that. I turned to look at him. I didn't yell or throw anything. I just looked at the empty space above the fireplace where my portrait and family photos used to be. You didn't think I needed rest, Conrad, I said, voice cold as ice. You thought I was an asset you could liquidate. You signed me away like an old car and turned my own children into your accomplices. I leaned in close so only he could hear. But the worst part isn't what you did to me. It's what you did to Sarah and Michael. You made them complicit in abandoning their mother. You stole months of their lives they'll never get back. Months they'll spend wondering if they failed me. I stepped back, voice rising so officers could hear. And in doing so, you signed yourself out. Get out of my house. Right as Conrad was being escorted out by police, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. She jumped out, took one look at the scene. Police, neighbors, Conrad in handcuffs, and screamed, "What did you do to my mother?" The entire neighborhood heard her. Michael's car pulled up 30 seconds later. Both my children, in front of God and everyone, told their father exactly what they thought of him. The fallout was swift and total. Because the bank had already flagged his irregularities, the full financial investigation moved at lightning speed. Conrad's accounts were frozen, and his business partners, terrified of being linked to an elder abuse scandal, quickly distanced themselves. He had no money, no home, no friends left. But the worst blow was yet to come. When Sarah and Michael saw the evidence, fake emails, manipulated medical reports, financial theft, their fury was volcanic. The confrontation outside the courthouse was brief and devastating, with news crews rolling because word had gotten out about the dramatic nursing home fraud case. "You made us abandon our mother," Sarah screamed at him, voice breaking. "You made us believe she was crazy when you were the one destroying our family." Michael, always quieter, stared at his father with disgust. "Don't ever contact us again. You're dead to us." Conrad tried to explain, tried to make them understand, but they walked away without looking back. He'd gambled everything on the idea I was too weak to fight back, and lost not just freedom and fortune, but his children. He ended up moving into a cramped studio apartment on the bad side of town, the very life he'd spent 40 years trying to avoid. The mistress disappeared into the city, likely looking for her next target. I felt strange peace watching the last of his things hauled away in a dumpster. He tried to bury me, but forgot I was a seed. I didn't just survive, I grew back stronger than ever. And I had my children back. A few weeks later, the house felt like mine again. The modern art was gone, my wedding portrait back in its rightful place above the mantel, alongside all family photos. Sarah and Michael helped me replant the memorial garden, and we held a small ceremony for the grandchild we'd lost. The generic red roses were dug up, and professional gardeners helped restore my father's lilies. But I didn't just go back to my old life. I used reclaimed funds to finance a massive renovation at Silver Oaks, not for luxury furniture, but for a new legal wing. I hired lawyers to provide free support for any spouse abandoned or coerced into the system. Arthur and Delilah were the first board members, and Sarah, with her social work background, became our first full-time advocate. Michael, a financial planner, helped track down other victims of similar schemes. I sit in my favorite chair now, looking out at the garden where my grandchildren play during visits. I'm not bitter about the time I lost, because it taught me exactly who I am and brought my children and me closer than we'd ever been. We learned that love isn't just about trust, it's about fighting for each other when that trust is betrayed. I wasn't rescued by some hero. I reclaimed my own life with help from friends I found in the dark and children who learned to see through lies. As the sun sets, I walk to the front door and turn the deadbolt. It's a solid, reassuring sound. The door locks this time, but it locks from the inside, with my family safe within these walls, and I'm the one with the only key. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. There is another one waiting on your screen right now.